So we have a selection of a few videos here today for Pixel Talk. And let's see what happens.
If you want to be loved, you need to be yourself. This piece of advice, offered in slightly altered forms depending on whether one is seeking romantic love, success, or friendship, feels like a big fat lie.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, how can you be anything but yourself? And then once you are yourself, isn't that kind of where the problems begin?
First, in today's tough economic times, money stresses can really be overwhelming.
Yeah, but help is on the way. Author Christine Eckert is here to show us some exercises to reduce stress. Hi, Christine.
Good morning.
Hi, Jim and Tracy.
Christine, I'm so glad you're here. I'm about ready to snap.
She is.
The first thing we're going to learn about is problem visualization.
Okay.
It's a simple method for reducing stress by assigning an image to represent your anxiety.
Well, that sounds simple enough.
Okay, the first thing I like to do is imagine my money-related stress as the most disgusting, terrifying creature I can think of.
Okay.
I like to imagine an ugly, greasy little creature with a hooked nose and oily black hair.
Oh, he is scary.
I call him the Grabbler because he's a greedy little monster who wants to grabble up all my money. Now close your eyes and picture the Grabbler.
Okay, there he
Now
is.
think of all the problems your Grabbler is causing. He invented interest rates like the ones on your credit card.
Oh.
He's taking the jobs because Grabblers only hire their own kind.
I just want to get rid of
Now
him.
imagine the Grabbler slowly disintegrating like a pile of ashes blown away by a purifying wind. And now you're in a peaceful meadow full of lilies swaying in a gentle breeze.
that's
They're not
nice.
scheming or trying to rob me.
Oh, that really works.
Ooh, what?
Yeah.
Assumed. That artist was the famous movie director David Cronenberg, and that famous work was the 1983 science fiction horror film Videodrome. Like with Metal Gear Solid 2, Videodrome predicted a future where the world would drown in a flood of misinformation and be unable to distinguish fact from fiction. But it also predicted other obvious consequences that Metal Gear neglected. Primarily, alongside that flood of misinformation would be an inevitable flood of overstimulation, brought about by easily accessible programming that would satisfy every niche and soothe every bias. The result would be a society constantly looking for new highs, until each person would be struck with an irreversible addiction that rendered them physically and mentally decadent. Now,
unworldly pursuits. Pagan cultures who incorporate scarification, tattooing, or other body modifications by direct contrast often do so as a specifically spiritual exercise, an intentional interaction with one's physical presence in the world, and an acknowledgement of the suffering and obligations involved in having physical form, frequently in tribute to some small g god of the earth, the sea, the sun, food, sexual maturity, some entity that has concrete effect on you and that you can see with your eyes every day. Can you not?
Not increase of consciousness is the goal, but enhancement of power. In the quest to live a good life, each of us, consciously or implicitly, chooses an ultimate value around which to orient our life. For many, this value is wealth. For others, it may be status, social acceptance, happiness, pleasure, love, knowledge, or comfort. In this video, drawing from the insights of the 19th century philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, we are going to argue that if we want to maximize our health and fulfillment, the the value we should esteem the highest is power. What is good, asks Nietzsche? All that heightens the feeling of power, the will to power, power itself in man. What is bad? All that proceeds from weakness, not contentment, but more power. Many people associate the concept of power with the ability to control others and to put them in the service of their needs and desires. But this is not the type of power Nietzsche had in mind. As for him, the desire to control others is often the manifestation of an underlying weakness, or as he writes, the will of the weak to represent some form of superiority, their instinct for devious paths to tyranny over the healthy. Where can this not be discovered, this will to power of the weakest?
We learn from a young age that to be oneself, to be messy, ugly, needy, and stupid, isn't lovable. Crying because we feel hurt or launching into a temper tantrum is met with the disapproval of our caretakers. Here we may hear the echoes of Jordan Peterson's parental advice. An angry child should sit by himself until he calms down. Then he should be allowed to return to normal life. That means the child wins instead of his anger. The rule is, come be with us as soon as you can behave properly. The child learns to be accepted for not who they are, but how they are. Their worth is dictated by their behavior. Later on,
the film was released in 1983, it's quite obvious that Cronenberg had trouble conceiving of things like the internet and the way it would create this overstimulated society via social media, YouTube, and easy access to pornographic material. But like with most forms of prophetic science fiction, the details might be incorrect, but the concepts are sound. In order to explain why that is, it would serve those familiar and unfamiliar with Videodrome to hear a quick synopsis. The film begins with a character named Max waking up in his apartment. Within the first few moments of being introduced to Max, it quickly becomes clear that he isn't very concerned with things like class, morality, or his personal health. His apartment is littered with suggestive images of women. His breakfast consists of stale pizza crust, which he dips in his coffee. Nowhere is his sleazy behavior more apparent, however, than at his job. Max is the president of a small Toronto-based television station named Civic TV. Despite its small size, Civic TV is able to survive by providing a niche audience with content that they have a hard time finding anywhere else. Specifically, stuff like soft pornography and harder violence than most TV stations would allow. After having viewed this type of highly stimulating content for a while, Max finds himself wanting to provide something, well, to use his words, tougher. Something that will provide him and his audience with the invigoration that they have been progressively lacking.
Honestly, this makes more sense to me than trusting the word of some people who hear voices telling you everything's going to be fine if you just wait until you're dead, but I digress. But what all of these religious traditions have in common is an insistence that one way or another, the human condition involves a lot of pain. Abrahamic religions might frown upon tattoos and piercings, but in a lot of ways, they still worship suffering. You're supposed to deny yourself most forms of satisfaction as a spiritual exercise, especially if you're anything but a straight man. Oh, and let's not forget that the Christian symbol is literally an instrument of torture. And this seeps into our culture in ways we don't always recognize. For example, tattoos and piercings might be cool and fine now, but among the entrepreneur influencer crowd, I've recently been noticing a lot of attempts to make Stoicism the trendy new secular religion of the day. Stoicism is an ancient Greek philosophy that incorporates a lot of interesting ideas, but which today you can see most often boiled down to how you can best maximize your productivity under capitalism, and the idea that suffering is not a fact of reality, but is in fact a result of your own misperception of your place in the world.
power Nietzsche thought we should pursue is a power we embody and express within ourselves. A power, in other words, that is equivalent to what Nietzsche called growth and expansion, or to what the contemporary philosopher John Richardson called the enhancement of a capacity or an activity already given. As a few examples, an athlete who becomes stronger is increasing his power, as is the writer who improves her writing, the orator who sharpens his public speaking abilities, or the teacher who enhances her capacity to educate. In the book Nietzsche's Values, John Richardson elaborates on what for Nietzsche is the highest and purest form of power. Power is more like, not by its mere continuation, nor by its multiplication, but by life's being raised to a higher level of capacity and control. Power is transition to a higher level, a self-overcoming.
We note that being too vulnerable or weird drives away romantic prospects. What we are left with is an ultimatum. You can either be yourself or you can be loved. And so our relationships become cyclical. We compromise in the beginning, prioritizing attachment over authenticity. We tuck away ourselves, repressing the emotions that feel closest to us. But this only lasts for a short while. Sooner or later, ugly truths violently crash through our frozen surface of conformity. We risk a divorce, a breakup, a severing of ties with our family members. And then, after a while, we miss the basic need of belonging and once again repress who we are to be with others. Is this cycle an inevitability?
I feel so relaxed.
Now, this image visualization works for other kinds of stresses besides money, right?
Say you had an argument with someone at work. Take that social stress and visualize it being due to a blabbler.
Blabbler, well, look at that.
Those represent all that negative energy we experience when dealing with difficult personalities. You know, the kinds of people who love to argue and complain in nasal voices.
Oh, I know
Yes,
people like
stresses
that.
are everywhere.
Right, they are, and they're always lurking like rats. You know, that's why sometimes meditative exercises aren't enough. So take your mind off your stress by doing something good for yourself. Exercise.
Oh, I know I feel better after my yoga class.
Right.
I will often go for a long walk in the middle of the night and throw flaming bottles at certain houses, or even sneak in through the back doors and light their curtains on fire while they're asleep.
Working up a sweat to rid yourself of that stress. All right, well, Christine, thanks so much for being our guest this morning and sharing your advice. Everyone should check out Christine's new book, The Solution, Kill All the Grabblers, and it's available in bookstores now. And when